So speaking about your recommendations for the industry, industry based in the EU, what would your recommendations? Sorry, what would your recommendations be for companies working with computer validation? Do you have some advices?
I would say that in some instances, I think that people are still a bit scared. They believe that validation is so complicated. If we say validate a computerized system, or if we talk about validating spreadsheets or databases, it's
no, because we still see that you have we get a lot of inquiries on how do you actually validate a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So,
and they see a monster. And there is no monster. No. It's not that difficult, and I still see that people don't get the whole scope, and that's why they think it's so huge and so complicated. But it doesn't have to be that complicated. Of course, you can always overcomplicate anything, but there are things you can do to be in compliance. So I think that, of course, increasing your knowledge about how to go ahead and do these things, because the scope of everything that we say is a computerized system can be anything from a little pH meter with an embedded software to a really, really complex system. And of course, you need to do different things. But it's better to understand how to do different things with that small application, where you perhaps only need to do some basic calibration of the instrument and really have a holistic approach, to the other end where you have to do a really good process all the way from your requirements and your specifications for the software design. But to understand that, to be able to have this differentiated approach, it's much better than sort of go ahead and doing a risk assessment, and say that this is low risk, we will not validate, because that is not in compliance.
That's a dangerous way.
Yes, and I have seen several examples where you actually use those Excel spreadsheets. For example, having a register for your equipment, and if you have 150 different pieces of things to calibrate, and you use your own made Excel application to keep track of them, and then one instrument has the wrong format, so it will never come up. It will always be at the end of the list, so that piece of equipment perhaps will not be calibrated. So, and you would have detected that perhaps if you did some work with that. But someone decided it's low risk, so we don't need to do a validation. It's just a secondary system to help us. Yes. So, but we see examples where you actually see the results when you don't do the proper thing initially.
So we have a mission.
Yeah,
we do. We have to demystify, the concept of computer validation, and explaining, in straightforward terms, what is it that it's all about, to make sure that we make some proper test and qualification.
Yeah, and make sure that first of all, make sure that you define what you want to use it for, and then prove that it can do that.
Yes.
So do some testing to prove that, and keep a good protocol and a good record and a report. And it's up to you, because it's your use. You are using it. You cannot ask the developer to say that it was proper for your application in the lab if that developer was on the other side of the continent, or developed it for general use. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any recommendations on eventually guidelines to use, speaking about computer validation? Because as you mentioned yourself, there could be some best practice in making use of the GAMP 5 guide, which is often used as a chosen best practice guide.
Yes, that one is out there, and I actually haven't heard if it's going to be updated, because it has a couple of years.
I think it's back from 2008 or so.
Yes,
yeah,
so
right.
And things goes quickly, and changes quickly.
Yes.
I work a lot with medical device companies as well, and in that aspect. There are other guidelines published. They of course work a lot with software validation, because they have the same. They have exactly the same situation. They have a requirement to validate software in production and software in the quality system, and that has been strengthened. That in the ISO 13485 standard as well, and in the US it has been an old requirement. So international medical device manufacturers, they know a lot about this, and they do it. But they also have software in their devices, and they have standalone software. And all those softwares need to be validated, and they work slightly different with different standards. Some of them are related to ISO standards, and there is a huge group of IEC standards that can be applicable. So I think that perhaps pharma industry have some benefit benchmarking a little bit.
Good lessons learned when looking into global standards.
Yes,
yeah.
Because there are other approaches. So then GAMP, and sometimes those approaches can, together with the ideas and concepts in the GAMP, they can inspire you to have an appropriate level of documentation and find practical approaches to your software validation applications.